I'm going to go ahead and hit record, and then we can go ahead and get started. Luis, welcome. Are you over in Pasadena? What's going on?
Thank you. Yeah, Colin, appreciate it. Thanks everybody for having me. I am in Pasadena.
Awesome.
I felt the heat yesterday.
It's probably a little warmer inland. I'm on the west side here, and we just got this June gloom going on. So it's been actually strangely like cloudy the last few days. You still have some similar overcast?
Interesting. Yes. Every morning. Yeah. But it's all good. Can't complain,
It's all good. Exactly. Luis, we were actually just talking, and I just want to throw you right into the fire here with us because have you ever heard of Origin, the financial planning company?
I have, yes.
Any experience with them, working with them? And that kind of just brought up another topic of like working hourly, which is, kind of flirting with just the advice only model and how that kind of, it starts to separate the asset management from some of the advice. You can kind of see where we're going there. I'm curious if you have any experience with that or any comments there.
Yeah, they had reached out to me initially when they first launched, and I introduced them to another colleague of mine that was looking to do hourly work at the time because I was really focused on just growing my practice. Mm-hmm. So I kind of passed on it, but I have done similar work in terms of like side hustles. For example, I worked with a company, it's called Delegated Planning. And what they do is they do financial plans, but their clients are the advisor, not the end client. Mm. So the financial advisors, usually advisors that are more focused on like AUM side of the business, but they do some planning, but then they might not be as savvy on the planning side. So they hire companies like that, right? Like Simply Power Planner, things like that. So yeah, I think I heard a little bit of what Kimberly was saying about that fiduciary advice where it doesn't matter what the outcome is, right? They can choose A, B, C, or D, and you're still getting compensated the same. So there's no incentive there. So it creates that further, one more separator, right? Between commissions and true sound financial advice. So yeah, I have had some experience with Origin from afar, but I didn't join them. But I do have a colleague that uses them now, and he likes the work. And I think it's a great way for people, like if any of you ever thought about like starting your own practice, it might be inevitable for you to have a side hustle in the meantime, like I had to do. I had a full-time job when I launched my firm, but it was similar. It was working with the military. It was through a company out of Virginia that hires CFPs to work with service members and their families and do like financial counseling, budgets and things like that. So it kind of worked out. So I think it's a great opportunity. I feel like it also makes you a better planner when you're doing that kind of work as well, because you might encounter scenarios that maybe you wouldn't have had with your own clientele. So it makes you expand your wealth of knowledge too.
Which actually is a good transition or a good pivot here into how you got started. Kind of going even back further into your past. Born and raised in Dominican Republic, moved here around age 11, parents hardly speaking English. How the heck does someone go from maybe that kind of background to owning and running your own planning shop, and then also reaching multiple hands down and starting, your Black and Latino internship program? And I mean, you have so many different hats that you're wearing. Kind of walk us through, how does one even get started? Because just looking at where you are today, that just seems like light years in order to get to where you are.
I wear too many hats, I think, by the way.
Yeah, that was one of the first questions someone asked was, we need to ask him how he gets everything done. So
Absolutely. So yeah, growing up in Dominican Republic, I didn't know English, right? It was my Spanish was my first language. So we came here. My father came in 1987, and then we followed in 91, 4 years later, because it takes a while. So I was actually like, I only saw my dad like twice a year for about 4 years there. And this was before FaceTime and all that stuff.
So difficult.
Yeah. So I went from Dominican Republic to a predominantly Dominican neighborhood in New York City. It's called Washington Heights. It's uptown Manhattan. So right across the street from New Jersey on this side, on the New York side of the George Washington Bridge. So one of the things I noticed growing up was like my parents brought us here, but like they didn't know English. And they also didn't know the US financial system either. So like they didn't have anything to teach us in terms of money. It was more like, hey, work hard and get an education, but that's about it, right? Which is a great foundation. So I just realized like me and some of our siblings were like the first of many in our family to be graduating college. My parents never even made it to high school, and even all the jobs that they had in the US, they never had any benefits. So they never had a 401k, life insurance. They didn't even own a car. So they had really nothing to say, hey, here's how this works. Here's what a stock is or anything, right? So it ended up us teaching them stuff because my parents, I remember they used to go to like the check cashing place. They didn't even have bank accounts. They would go to a check cashing place. They'll pay a fee to get their checks cashed. And then everything was cash, right? They'll go to several different places in the neighborhood to pay like their light bill. They go to the post office, get money orders. It was just like, there was no, like not even a bank account that they just, simple stuff, right? That we all take for granted. Just go online, pay your bills. So I remember, like setting my parents up with their bank account and then like, hey, I see you have a cell phone. Why don't we pay with your bank account by logging in? And I created a username and password for them because they couldn't even figure that out, right? But they were paying all these like $4 here, $2 there, like these transaction fees, they were adding up. Yeah. So I just realized like, all right, there's gotta be a better way. And I just noticed like everybody in my community was kind of similar, where like even from a generational wealth standpoint, they didn't have anything to continue on wealth with the generation. Like everybody kind of just started from scratch. I always tell people like the best thing I saw in terms of finances was when my grandfather passed away. He left enough money to pay for his funeral. And I just remember like, to me, this was like before GoFundMe days, right? To me, like that was like such an accomplishment of his, because everything that I had known prior to that was just people passing away completely broke and everybody just trying to scramble and figure out how they're gonna bury this person, right? So that's where like the passion came from for me. I didn't know that it would turn into financial planning and running my own firm, but I was like, I want to like just help others as well with all the mistakes I made. And so when I went to college, there was no financial planning degree offered in my school. I didn't know what financial planning was at all. I never knew anybody that had investments either or spoke with a financial plan. It was just not a topic of conversation in my family. It was more about survival, right? Just make money and try to, we were in a 1-bedroom apartment and there was 6 siblings, my parents, my grandparents, anywhere between 10 to 12 people all the time, right? Cousins come over. It was crazy. So when I graduated college, I met I was working at a law firm as a mailroom clerk, just a job that I had while I went to school. And the receptionist there knew a CFP professional. And he was partners with a CPA. And I was already looking for work back in 2001. And they were like, hey, you graduated college. I want to introduce you to my friend who has his own business. Maybe you guys, can hit it off, whatever. So we went to a Yankees game and he told me what he did. I still had no idea. It went right over my head. Yeah. But ultimately he was like, hey, if you want to work with me, maybe I can hire you part-time. And I remember I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So I stayed working at the mailroom from 8:30 to 4:30. And then I went over and drive to the Bronx where he had his office and worked with him from like 5:30 to 10 every day. And I was sitting in client meetings and it took me a while to figure out like, what does this guy do? Because everything was so different every meeting. And I'm like, I don't understand what he gets paid for, yeah. And eventually kind of clicked after several meetings and just like, wow, like he helps people with their finances and achieve goals and kind of thinking outside the box sometimes, right? How do we get there? So I fell in love with it and I ended up working with them for 15 years. So in that firm, because they were CPA and CFP, they were doing investment management, financial planning, and tax preparation. And when I came on board, they wanted to expand their services. So they had me get a mortgage license, life insurance license, and also, the usual Series 6 and 7, 63 and all that. So I ended up doing taxes. Eventually I got my IRS enrolled agent certification, did investments. And I got a really wide like experience in terms of people's finances. So we became like a one-stop shop. Yeah. And then in 2015, my wife went back to school to become a dietitian, which required that she does a 1-year internship at a school. And she got into UNLV in Vegas. So we ended up moving to Las Vegas for a year and turned out to be 5 years. So even before the pandemic, I started working remotely with clients already because most of them were still back in New York. So I was kind of ready when pandemic hit. I was like, all familiar with Zoom and everything, you know.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so I kind of had to go on my own then because I ended up leaving that firm in New York because they wanted me to be physically there.
Mhm.
And I bounced around with a few RIAs, but ultimately I realized that the people that were my peers were not getting financial planning advice because they did not have any money to invest yet. Or if they did, it was maybe starting on a monthly basis, right? Maybe open up a Roth or $100 a month or whatever. So I'm like, well, people can't get access to financial planning. There's got to be another way. So I don't know what I was searching for, but I ended up bumping into like Michael Kitz's XYPN and all that. And I was like, you know, I heard of other advisors that had launched their own firms. Like, what? I came from the broker dealer world basically, and I just, to me, it was just like a complete new world. I was like, wow. So I just went for it, you know, and here I am. It's only 2 years old, my firm. I got approved in April 2020, the middle of the pandemic. A great time to launch a financial planning firm.
Wow, that's an incredible story. So when we first met, then when you were teaching a class for the FPA over in the New Orleans area, were you living in Vegas then at that time?
Yes.
Okay, okay, gotcha. All right, it's all starting to make a little bit more sense here. Which, speaking of, are you going to the Next Gen gathering potentially in Vegas in a few
I'm
months?
hoping to. Yeah, I have another trip in August in Vegas, so it's kind of back to back. But I am hoping to.
Awesome. So it kind of it almost fell into your, I mean, maybe by just randomness. I mean, it sounds like you were quite savvy helping your parents, you know, kind of get at least banked, right? Which is just an unbelievable story in itself. What was then just recently, have you kind of taken on the idea that the firm that you want to start and you want to build and create is really serving a specific type of demographic, a specific type of client? What does your firm look like, and what's the mission nowadays?
Yeah, so I don't have a niche per se. I think a lot of I came from like the generalist environment, but I feel
Mhm.
like there are some characteristics that kind of make a niche because I do work with a specific type of person, but
Mhm.
it's kind of hard to market to because it's not like I work with doctors or people in tech, right? It's
Right.
more like people who value advice and are willing to be in a long-term relationship with a professional that they value to use as like a sounding board. Sometimes, you know, a lot of my clients call me before, you know, they do things, not after, right? Because I've had those people where they do something like, hey, we just bought a house. What do you think?
Yeah, what are you
um,
doing?
so yeah, for the most part, I'm working with people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Mhm.
And what the commonalities for them are usually they are in the building phase of their lives, very dynamic. So it's
Mhm.
like changing careers, jobs, new kid, trying to save for a home, and trying to understand everything all at once, like multiple goals that they want to accomplish, right? Like we got to save for this down payment and we got to save for college and we want to retire at 55, right?
Yeah.
So I like the dynamic aspect of it. Um, and I also happen to have about half of my clients happen to be Hispanic or Latino.
Okay.
I don't necessarily put myself out there as like the Latino CFP professional or anything, but
Yeah.
they tend to gravitate. Probably
Absolutely.
because of my story. Maybe they find something relatable there too. I find a lot of my clients are younger, but then they have parents that are older who either don't speak English or are more comfortable in Spanish. And that's kind of
Mhm.
been another thing where I end up having like family meetings. It'll be like the kids and the parents together. And when we're doing like planning so that the kids and everybody understand like why we're doing what.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what my practice looks like. Um, I came from the AUM world, and now I have a very financial planning focused business. I do manage assets,
Mhm.
but it's not a requirement. And if they do, there's no minimum. So a lot of my clients only pay me for financial planning, whether they have investments elsewhere or they don't have an investments yet, or maybe they're all just like in the 401k at this point and they don't have enough yet to start saving outside because they're paying debt and things like that. So that's kind of what my business structure looks like. And I do tax returns as well. So
Mhm.
most of my clients, I usually do all three for. So I'll do financial planning, the investments, and also do their taxes as well. After a while, when somebody's doing all that with you, like it's so much easier to work with them because you know their entire, like just everything, right? And all the pieces. So like I'm able to plan around all that. and not be surprised tax time. We're like, oh, why did you do this or anything, you know?
So to kind of expand on just that service model and that you're working with young people who, the acronym Henrys, right? The high earners, not rich yet, different type of demographic, maybe requires a different type of fee model. Would you mind just expand a little bit more just for the people either on the call right now or people watching it in the future that maybe aren't used to ever hearing about this subscription thing or flat fee thing? What does that look like?
Yeah, that was new to me. Let me tell you, if you're in that boat, believe me, I was in the industry for 15 years and had not ever heard the terms fee only in my life.
Yeah.
Or fiduciary. Straight up just commissionable mutual funds and life insurance, you know? So what I do now is on the financial planning side, going forward, what I'm trying to build is a client. I did it based on revenue per client, basically. So my model is I would like to have every client generate $5,000 or more per year in revenue. And I don't care exactly how that comes, you know, so it could be a combination of AUM, planning fees, and financial planning. But to give you an example, let's say my typical client now, it's a couple, like you said, Henry's, they probably make 250,000 or more, right? Which it's not necessarily a lot of money depending on where you live. You know, I know clients that make 250 in New York, and it's they barely have anything left at the end, you know, with childcare and everything, you know, it's super expensive. But ultimately, I would then charge them a $5,000 per year ongoing fee. And they either pay $1,250 a quarter or $417 a month, whatever that is. If they do not have any assets, that's fine, because I'm charging them on a financial planning side. And, you know, it doesn't matter, again, what kind of advice I give them, because my fee is the same regardless. So there's no, they know that there's no incentive there for me to tell them anything differently. If clients make less than 250, what I do sometimes, and I would charge 2% of their gross income, because I know not everybody's going to be able to afford $5,000 a year. So I have clients, to give you an example, that, you know, even I have a, you know, a single client that makes 90,000 a year. He's not married yet, doesn't have any kids, you know, so I charge him 2% of that, so 1,800 a year. And then he just pays me quarterly. So I kind of thought about 5,000 a year going forward. If somebody cannot afford that and I like them and they kind of fit into the people I want to work with, and they just otherwise can't afford it, I just charge 2% of their income. So yeah, it could be as little as 1,800, 1,500 a year. But then it starts growing, because they'll be like, hey, can you do my taxes? And I'll charge them $300 or $400 for a return. And then some people are hybrid, where they have, let's say, $150,000 from like old 401ks or something, and they roll it over to an IRA under my management. So I will charge them 1% on that. So that'll be 1,500. And then I'll charge them the difference as a planning fee. So I have a lot of clients that will pay like $250 a month plus 1% on the AUM. You know, once they reach the 5,000, then I reduce one or the other to not like charge them too much. If somebody has $500,000 or more, then I just don't charge them the planning fee, and I just charge 1% and include planning, and the tax is only 1%.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for breaking that down. That seems like a really fair and like just a way to be totally transparent and say, hey, I got to charge you somehow. Where do we want it to come from? And you're going to get the same service, the same great advice, but let's just be open and honest about where it's coming from.
Right.
Love that model. One thing I wanted to ask you here, and a lot of people were wondering, is the podcast. I saw on social media, was it 50,000 downloads recently? Yeah. Congratulations. That is seriously a huge accomplishment. What made you want to start the podcast? What is the kind of common theme to the podcast? And then I'll have some marketing questions once we get going here.
Definitely. So the podcast is called On My Way to Wealth, and it has its own website, onmywaytowealth.com, and it's also on all of the major podcasting platforms like iTunes, Spotify, and all that. What I was thinking about was, I can't possibly service everybody, right? Even if I'm super efficient, I'm probably going to tap out at like 100, 125 clients, maybe at most, right? If I'm super good.
Yeah.
So I wanted to still give some people the ability to at least learn something, even if they don't work with me one-on-one. And I named it On My Way to Wealth because I was like, what are all of the things that we encounter on our way to wealth? You know, between now and where we want to be, there's going to be a ton of stuff, job changes, new homes, right? Changes in the tax law, et cetera. So I kind of thought about, let me do something that kind of helps people navigate all those life changes. So a lot of the content sometimes is, it could be static, right? Like the difference between a Roth and a traditional, but I also do a lot of current events. So I talk about inflation and the Fed and like just things that are happening right now that probably won't matter 3 months from now, but
Sure.
I like to also keep it fresh as well. So not all of it is evergreen. So a lot of the times I do a solo episode. It probably ranges between 20 to 25 minutes by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes I would have a guest. A lot of the times, a lot of my colleagues in the industry, so other financial planners that specialize in something. So I've had people that come and talk about stock options, you know, credit, just everything that I can think of. I usually let my client questions drive the topics. I find that it's a great way, as opposed to me coming up with topics and figuring out what people want to hear.
Yeah.
Sometime during the week, I'm going to get an email and say, hey, you know, my dad passed away and I got this inherited IRA. You know, and then I will get on the phone with them, talk about the rules and all that stuff. And it's like, hey, there's a podcast topic. There's
Next episode.
People, right, who inherited IRAs.
Nice. That's a great way to do it. I do something similar. Like if I have more than, 3-4 questions in a row of the same topic, it's like, all right, next blog post. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. What has that journey been like for yourself in creating this podcast? Because you're a business owner, you're a CFP professional, you're a compliance officer for your firm. Yep. And then why not just throw on the marketing hat and be a podcast creator? Do you edit? Do you upload it? Like what is this entail? What does it take to create this podcast?
Yeah, so I'll give a shout out to Justin Castelli. If any of you know him, he's another advisor who has, I think he has 2 podcasts, one for the general public and one for advisors. So I got on the phone with him prior to launching my podcast to kind of just find out, hey, how do you do this, right? Yeah. He was very nice and he gave me everything. He was like, here's the mic I use, here's like the platform and all. But the great piece of advice that he gave me, which I implemented immediately, was like, look, you can learn how to edit and all that. If you want to, go ahead, just in case you find yourself in a pinch one day. But he's like, delegate as much as you can. Like if you can get it to the point where you just record, and then when you're done recording, somebody else handles everything else, like do that. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go with that, because you're right. Like I'm my own chief compliance officer and I'm trying to grow the business. And then there's so much time spent doing everything else. So that's just one more hat, right? So what I do now, I have a production company that charges me per episode, depending on the length. It's actually not that expensive. I pay, it's $30 if they're under 30 minutes and $60 if they're between 30 and an hour.
Okay.
I'm either paying 30 or $60 per episode. What they do is, once I'm done recording, I usually do it over Zoom like we're doing right now, just talking to myself on Zoom, recording it. Mm-hmm. Then I send him the audio. And from there, he had already created my intro and my outro, and then he'll edit it, sound levels, all that, and just make it one cohesive episode. And sometimes there's some editing if I needed to say something over or delete something. He'll take care of that. And then he also pushes it out using there's a platform, the one I use is called Libsyn, Libsyn. And basically that's like the host for the podcast. That way it doesn't live on my website, because then as the years go by and I keep adding episodes, it will slow down like the functionality of my website. So it kind of just, if you go to my website, you're like basically streaming it from Libsyn. He pushes it out. And then I have an employee that used to be my intern and then I hired. So I'm sure we'll talk about BLX for a second. So what he does for me is when I'm done recording, I upload the audio file and I have it transcribed using Otter, OTTER. Mm-hmm. I have the transcription done, and then my employee then listens to it, reads the audio transcription, and turns that into a blog post that will correspond on the same day that the episode drops. And then he'll put together the show notes. He does a graphic for me in Canva. Mm-hmm. And then, every week it's like a running task, like getting the podcast out to the newsletter list, he uses Buffer. So he'll put it on social media for me as well. And I just go in later and like comment if people said anything. So I got it to that point where all I do is record and that's it. And somebody else handles the rest.
It's like magic.
Yeah. The research part of it is time consuming though, because sometimes like I would have him do some research and give me like some trends that are maybe happening in the financial world. But ultimately, yeah, like I'm the only one that could do that portion of it. So it's sometimes it'll take me a while just to like read some articles and put together some bullet points that I can then go ahead and talk about.
Which, speaking of, we might as well just get a tiny bit of market commentary here. I don't know if you have been having some clients reach out. We've finally crossed the 20% mark. So it's a bear market. And I've kind of been joking that, you know, a 19% drawdown, that just doesn't quite scratch the itch that the markets seem to need. We got to call it a bear market, and then that changes everything.
Right.
What has been the vibe from your clients? Any reach out, any concerns for maybe any younger advisors listening? How would you talk a client off the cliff or off the edge in that moment?
Yeah, one thing I learned early on is to be proactive, because you don't want to sit here and wait for the client to reach out to you panicked.
Right.
So a lot of what I do is communication ahead of time, right? So I'm always on, since I send out communication every week anyway for the podcast, I would then send out stuff about, you know, the Fed or what it means or inflation and so on. So for the most part, the clients that have been with me for a while are not really panicking, especially because they've already lived through some, like March 2020, for example, and they've seen it all come back, and it always feels different, right? But
yeah.
So the conversations I'm having are, for the most part, the younger clients are super excited to go even further in and like buy the dip, and you know, it's funny because sometimes you got to talk those clients off that cliff as well, because they want to go, you know, I have a client right now, he's like 28, and he's like, oh, can I just take all my emergency savings and put it in the market because I want to buy the dip? And I'm like, well, no, let's keep your emergency savings.
Yeah.
We can dollar cost average a little bit later, you know, as you get like bonuses and whatever. But that's been pretty interesting. With the older clients, I have a few that I know that are concerned.
Yeah.
But still, it's like, look, you're 5-7 years out from retirement, and you know, now it's not the time to like get out and go to cash, you know. And sometimes it feels like a broken record to some degree, because ultimately I find myself telling them the same thing, even though it's a different situation. But I feel that I know that the data helps. So when I show them like, look, these bear markets happen every so often, and the last one on average, you know, it takes 9 months to recover. Most of the gains in the market usually happen after a bear market. And if you miss just like the top 10 days in the market, like your rate of return is so different than had you stayed in. I mean, we saw that like 2 weeks ago, we had like a record week, right? So I go there and just show a few charts. Don't get too technical, but just to kind of remind them of, hey, we've been here before. Remember March 2020? Yeah, right? Like you lost X amount. Look at that. You made all of it back plus some, and so on. And that's kind of how I go about it. But I find that being proactive is the best. I actually even put together a webinar for my clients only, and I just called it Ask Me Anything. And I was like, hey, here's a Zoom link if you guys just want to hop on. And people like that stuff. I mean, a lot of the time, some people are like, oh, like, thank you. Like, I'm fine. Because they've already been so used to me being proactive all the time.
Right.
During like the pandemic, for example, because it was so big, I actually got on the phone and I called every single client, and I spent maybe a half hour with each. And a lot of the times we weren't even talking about money anymore. Like you probably talk about the market for like 5 minutes. That happened to me yesterday. And then you go into other things that are going on with their families. And they feel that confidence when you're the one reaching out and say, hey, I know this is happening. Here's why, here's my opinions on the market and so on. And it works.
So for young advisors listening, being proactive, maybe sharing some data, being empathetic, and just really kind of leaning into it. That sounds like that's going to just show that confidence. Everything's okay. And you're good to go.
Yeah. And, you know, I like the fact that because we are so planning focused, I've been able to, like, I use Money Guide Pro, right? So I've been able to go up, pull up a plan that I did and move the toggle, you know, and drop it by 20% on the return. I mean, like, look, your plan still works. Yeah, the needle moved a little bit on the probability, but like you're still fine. So just know that we've already accounted for these markets going up and down in your plan. So when you see this, it's not like it's going to derail your plan overall, so that gives them some confidence.
Yeah, that's good advice. BLX. What's this internship all about? What's kind of the program? You mentioned a little bit of maybe your history and maybe why this spoke to you the most. Throw on another cap here.
Another cap.
Another cap. Help, bringing advisors up. I know that's one of my passions as well, being the next gen chair for the Michigan chapter and trying to, just be that person that maybe you wish you knew when you were in college and giving some advice. What's this program all about?
Yeah, so I was looking at the CFP board statistics, and I remember at the time, Hispanic CFP professionals were like 2.6%. Wow. And Blacks were like 1.3, so I remember it being like 4% combined. And I was like, wow, that is such a low number. Yeah. Especially when you look at the demographics of the country, it just doesn't match, right? Yeah. So in 2020, when there was all the civil unrest, we had the murder of George Floyd, all that stuff was happening. Sean Tidlaska is one of the co-founders. He reached out to Emlyn Miles Mattingly, which is another one of the co-founders, and he was like, hey, like I feel like people are paying attention now, like I want to do something. And he's like, I'm thinking maybe I can bring on an intern or something like that, maybe provide an opportunity for somebody from an underrepresented population. And Emlyn was like, hey, you know what, let's talk to Lewis and Chloe and see maybe they want to take on an intern too or something like that, and see what we can do. And then we kind of just brainstormed like, hey, how about we take on interns, and then we reach out to our community of advisors and have them get an intern, Yeah. So it became something where we just reached out to our network. So we're like, all right, so what are some of the barriers to entry? I remember in my case, for example, coming from the Dominican Republic as an immigrant, like I never had the opportunity to not work. I've worked since I was 7 years old, yeah. In one way or the other. I've always had some sort of job that I did in addition to school, right? So I remember when I was in high school, because of my height, I'm 6'4", I'm not any good at sports at all. Yeah. But because of my height, they wanted to put me in every team pretty much, because they feel like, even basketball, like, hey, this guy's tall enough, he could just grab some rebounds for us or something, right? Yeah. But I could never join a team because they all require that you stayed after school for practice. And I always had a job my entire high school years, college, everything. So I was like, I can't not work. And there were no scholarships, there was nothing. So I'm sure if I was like really good, they would have figured something out. But when I was thinking about the internships, I was like, well, that's one way that people are prevented from entering the industries. A lot of people don't have that ability to just not work and go and do an internship for the summer to build a resume and gain some experience, right? Yeah. The number two thing that I noticed was that a lot of people, especially minority, that came into the industry was usually more from a sales side. Like even one of my nephews went to college, and when he did his internship at one of the major companies, he literally was told, hey, make a list of 100 names of everybody you know, and try and sell them these life insurance policies, right? He ended up not staying in the industry because he didn't like that aspect of it. Not obviously nothing wrong with life insurance. We need life insurance. But when you come in from that aspect, like not everybody is a salesperson, not everyone wants to be on the front end of the business. Yep. And we decided, okay, we all are firm owners, the four co-founders. We're all fee only. We know what the struggles are. So let's make it a requirement for firm owners to be fee only, for them to be willing to pay $15 an hour at a minimum, 15 hours a week for 8 weeks during the summer, which is not a huge financial ask. Yeah. And then the last thing was, we wanted them to be open to the idea of having a virtual candidate, because the pandemic was happening, was number one. And number two, I remember like me growing up in Washington Heights, that I've never seen an RIA or financial advisor's office. So aside from the bank, they were just like check cashing places, the bank, restaurants, liquor store, and the bodega. Like there was no RIA down the block. No. So like if you're open to a virtual candidate, now you can have somebody from Washington Heights work at an RIA in California, right?
Yeah.
And then we just ran with it. We didn't know what it was going to turn into because none of us had any like HR background or anything. But ultimately, a lot of people got behind us, like NAPFA, for example. They were like, "Oh, we love this idea. We're gonna like push it out to our membership, help you market it, whatever you guys need, put some webinars together." And then we had this company, this woman named Suzanne Lawrence that I know for a while. She has a business called Advisor Business Solutions, and she has a lot of HR background, but she helps advisors like transition and place employees and stuff. So she kind of had like that missing piece that we didn't even know we needed at the time. So she volunteered her team and herself to take on that task of interviewing every candidate, reviewing the resumes, giving them coaching, resume writing tips, interview tips, and so on. And then speaking to every firm owner, finding out what they needed, and then making a match internally. And now it's become more official because we became a 501c3. So we're able to get corporate sponsors, individual donors. So now we've gotten enough money to at least pay her. But it's been great. The first year we placed 36 interns with 26 different firms in the country. And 20 of them got job offers, part-time and full-time. I ended up hiring my intern as well from the first round. And then this year, just getting started, the internship just started. But we've gotten like so many resources, like eMoney just became a corporate partner, and they gave access to all of the interns to the Premier software and also eMoney University, like they do with the FPA Externship. So they'll be able to have that on the resumes as well. So we're really, really excited. Our goal eventually is to have 100 interns every summer go through this program or more.
That is absolutely incredible. I know that speaks to a lot of people on here. Stephanie's kind of nodding her head going, yep, we do quite a bit of job placement and trying to find mentorships and things like that. But to do that for an underserved community is just the coolest thing ever. Can't wish you the best enough on that.
Thank you.
So if people were trying to get involved in that, coming from a white dude standard in the industry, what would kind of be someone maybe for like myself to get involved with that? Maybe just
appreciate it.
Promoting it or just making this more well known. How does someone kind of participate?
Yeah, we need white dudes.
All right.
The more the merrier. Yeah, so a lot of the things that we need help with now is raising awareness of it. I know that a lot of people still don't know about the program.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it could be something as simple as just like retweeting one of our tweets or something. Also, if you want to volunteer some of your time we have for example, like we have a summer series for the interns. So it's a summer speaker series, and we have different advisors come on, like I'm doing today, kind of like share their story, how they got started, and give the opportunity for the interns to ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be another way of helping as well. Obviously, there's the money part of it. If anybody wants to donate, they can, or take on an intern, So plenty of ways to help. It's blxinternship.org. I'll put a link in the chat.
Awesome.
Did the interns get paid directly from BLX or from the advisors that they're interning for, or a combination of?
Yeah, great. No, they get paid directly by the firm. So we tell them, like, make this a hire just like you would your own outside hire, and they'll put them, if somebody doesn't have the experience, because maybe this is like their first intern, we give them some suggestions, like to use like payroll companies like Gusto and things like that. But ultimately, yeah, they get directly paid for by the firm. What we're trying to do with the revenue that we're generating eventually, aside from running the program itself, is to create opportunities for scholarships for the CFP certification and also to attend conferences like FPA Next Gen.
Awesome.
That's really cool.
I love all this. If I can help in any way or you need speakers, please put me down. Let's connect.
Thank you. Yes.
Happy to help. And I chair the Student Success Summit in February. And I just want to make sure that I put it out there. Let's make sure we connect and have
That'll
you come.
Be great.
It's February 3rd. If you want to do a little save the date, whether we do a speaking slot or get you to come to the virtual job fair we do at the end, or, let's make sure that students have access to this.
That'll be amazing. Thank you.
Yep.
And Stephanie is the president of the Michigan chapter for FPA and does a ton of work with connecting with students and getting job opportunities. And like you just mentioned, the Student Success Summit she has put on 2 years in a row, and it has been a smashing success in bringing students in from all over the country and really just doing a kind of for the students, by the students type event, bringing in really cool speakers. We've had Josh Brown and a number of fun people donate their time, and really the whole idea is to get students fired up about financial planning, and this would just plug in perfect for that.
Oh, perfectly. Yeah, there's some great synergy there. Yeah, I've done some talks at different chapters. If you guys are familiar with the Association of Latino Professionals for America, ALPHA, they have like student chapters throughout the country in different colleges. So I've done some speaking for those groups. Yeah, I'm all in and stuff like that. Absolutely.
And I work with program directors across the state, and just being able even to help make connections of, hey, pointing students to the website to get placed for internships and
That
stuff
would
too.
be great help. Absolutely.
I'll make sure I add that to my list. This is a good
Thank you.
reminder.
I'll send you an email.
Perfect.
Luis, I'm completely sold.
I appreciate
So
it. Thank you, Cody.
I'm launching Measure Twice planners. I'm giving 20% of gross revenue to scholarships. So like, I definitely want to connect to give. Like, I would love for you to be like not a sponsor in terms of, getting more money my way, but a sponsor meaning that I can teach people about you, like through my courses and stuff like that. Again, I love it. I love that anytime we can give back generously to the community, like, especially within our industry that needs it so much. Like, yeah, so I'll be sending you some money.
Yeah, I
hope in the
appreciate that.
next 6 months. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. We've had great support from the advisor community. We have, if you guys are familiar with the Beautiful Financial Plan, they're donating some of the proceeds to BLX, and then the advisor growth community, they're in the process of putting together a book as well, which they're going to donate some of the proceeds to BLX. So yeah, it's super exciting. I really appreciate that.
Oh yeah, so yeah, Mike Zung, yeah, he's
Mike
awesome.
Zung, yeah, he's helping us out as well. So yeah, and then we would help promote the courses and all that on our end as well. So it definitely be a win-win.
Awesome. Glad we're finding all the so much synergy here. This is great. You're gonna have to just join the FPA happy hours now every other month.
There you go. You had me a happy hour.
Yeah, exactly. And for us in California, we get a little of extended version, right? Because it starts a little early. So given that you are wearing all of these hats, I think we've gone through about 10 of them now. When this is kind of one of the first questions that popped up before you jumped on is, make sure to ask Luis how the heck he time blocks or gets all this stuff done. Do you kind of pick days in which that you do stuff? I know that at least in my firm, sometimes there's a ton of outreach. So it does kind of seem to be a little bit cyclical in the amount of work that the firm requires. But how are you able to kind of separate all of these different things? And even from the podcast, and you mentioned it comes out weekly, like that is what seems like a full-time job in itself.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a great question. There was a lot of trial and error, but I learned that I am not a good multitasker at all.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I was doing all the time. I would be working on a financial plan on one screen and I had Outlook open on the other screen, right? And my phone, on the table. And it's just like, you get pulled from many directions. Sometimes it'll take me 3 hours to complete a workout because I would do it with Outlook open. And I would just like stop and like respond to it. It's just crazy. Yeah. So what I learned to do was make better use of my calendar. So for example, I made the decision to not see clients on Mondays or Fridays. So Mondays is an operations day. I do a lot of colleague meetings. I also open up my calendar to anybody, whether it's a colleague or anybody that's a student or career changer that wants to just kind of talk to me, pick my brain. Mm-hmm. That's available on my website every Monday. People can log on and just like talk to me one-on-one for a half hour. So I made Monday that, right? So I have BLX meetings on Monday and other colleagues that want to talk to me on Mondays. Then Friday is my content day. Mm-hmm. And that's when I do the podcast recording, any last minute research I may need to do, the video, social media posting and all that stuff. And then I see clients Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that's one way that it has helped to have that consistency, like, okay, every Friday. It doesn't always work out, right?
Yeah.
I could do a better job at it, but at least I got the spirit down where it's like, all right, I only see clients these 3 days, and then I got my content days on Fridays and my operation day on Monday. And sometimes I think Wednesday I might do like a half a day or something, so I still have a couple of hours to do all the follow-ups and prep that I need to do for the meetings that I'm having on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's one way. Another way was delegate as much as you can, and it doesn't even need to be a full-time hire, so for example, that podcast person, I pay them $30 an episode. If I do one a week, say 4 in a month, it's $240 a month, right? But it's hours of time that I don't need to do anymore. So I just consider that a marketing expense. So it's not really that expensive, right? I don't have to hire him full-time. And then I got my BLX intern that I ended up hiring, and he works 12 hours a week for me. And I have him do a lot of stuff related to the podcast, the blog, a lot of projects that don't necessarily involve real time with the clients. And that's another way that I've been able to get it done. So leveraging either technology or just contractors that do what they do best, right? And eventually I want to hire somebody. I'm actually in the process of creating the job description for an admin that I want to hire for about 20 hours a week. Because I'm already, because of the many hats I wear, I'm already feeling like I'm at capacity, where I'm just, for the most part, every single minute is used up on something. And a lot of that stuff is not business building. It's just like working in the business. I want to work more on the business. So it's time to feel that pinch again and just like hire somebody, take less, take home, but I'm sure that somebody doing 20 hours of work for me, even if it's like $20 an hour, like I'm going to make that up.
Right.
I might feel the pinch for the first couple of months, but once I'm freed up. So that's been the key, keeping your calendar, like really respect your calendar. I struggled with that at the beginning, where I would very easily skip something that I set out to do for me. But I wouldn't miss a client meeting, right? So I needed to just treat those the same way. Anything, right? It could be a workout. And I also color code them. I got this from another fellow planner, Sophia Berra. Some of you know her. She told me like she'll make like client meetings green, and like, another color for like for you to have like a mental health day or whatever it is, anything that makes you feel good, yoga, workout, reading. So that way you can kind of balance it out when you look at your calendar and you're like, oh, there's not enough purple in here or whatever, right? Like I need to work out more or whatever, so that kind of helped out too. See it as a whole, the color coding helped.
Awesome. That's great advice. I've just recently blocked Fridays and probably could use another day to maybe not be so taken back by clients, because it is interesting, like when you get into a client meeting and you're prepping for it and then you're doing some of the outbound afterward and some of the notes, like then you're like, all right, well, that monthly newsletter, that's not going out this month, and right. I'm the king of that, so I should probably take some of this advice here.
Yeah, I learned that there are for the most part, there are no financial planning emergencies, so I started with not working on the weekends, at least not making myself accessible to clients on the weekend, because I'm like, you don't need to text me on a Sunday, or I don't need to text you back. Like worst case scenario, the most urgent thing I've seen is that somebody needs money from their account that you manage, right? And if it's a weekend or after hours, you can't help them anyway. So I'll get back to them, early in the morning, the following day or whatever, and then the market's open, I handle that transaction. So that has helped too, because I had a lot of anxiety around that. Like I pride myself in being like fully available, readily available, and just like respond to emails immediately. But that's not helping anybody. Just block out your time for returning emails. Just say, okay, I'm going to check email 2 times a day from this time to this time. So that way you can work in the middle and truly be focused on that plan or whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah. So you mentioned that maybe in the middle of our conversation here, that you might be maxed out if you did things really efficiently, 100, 120 clients. And that's kind of what the podcast is to be able to just serve and help more people than what you can do with just yourself. Do you foresee kind of some folks call it lifestyle practice, maybe just one lead advisor, solo practitioner type practice, where Luis kind of says, all right, no more clients. Is that day ever going to come? Or do you foresee kind of expanding? What's just given like you're already finding interns and, it feels like a really natural extension for you to continue to expand. What's kind of your feeling there?
Yeah, I'm certainly open to it. I got a little taste of that this tax season. I ended up for the first time getting help
Mhm.
where I wasn't doing it all. So I had technically 2 interns this tax season in a sense. And they were people that had reached out to me either from the FPA externship or they learned about me through the BLX internship. So like one of my interns was somebody who is a career changer and did not need to wait until the summer because she's not in school. She's already has a full-time job and everything. So I was like, hey, if you want to do a tax season internship, because she had H&R blog tax background on her resume. So I was like, oh, so let's do that instead. So I ended up, it's not something I had envisioned, but I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. I have people like helping me with taxes. I'm like, I can probably replicate that and have somebody eventually doing some of the para planning, maybe helping with the meeting preps and all that follow-ups. So I'm certainly open to that. And even in bringing in more advisors later on, for sure. But initially my thought process was, I'm going to do this for myself. I moved from New York to Vegas to LA. I want to be able to say, hey, I want to go try Florida out and see how that is. So I'm going to stay mostly virtual with a local presence wherever it is I live. And initially, yes, it was more of a lifestyle practice. But now that I see the possibilities, like I'm thinking more like a business owner now than just a financial planner. I want to put myself at the top of the funnel where I'm having most of the time either speaking to a client or a prospect or doing something like this, BLX or podcast videos, right? And then everything else have somebody else do that probably is even better than me at it,
That's kind of one thing that I always ask and even of myself in like creating content and stuff. And, you have this podcast now that's potentially going to become a marketing and already is a marketing machine. And you've built this, with all of this time and effort and educating people. And Cody's one of the kings at this of like just creating education and giving more and expecting nothing in return. Well, what usually happens is a lot comes back in return. And once this marketing machine takes off, then there might be more clients than just 100.
Absolutely, man. I like the sound of that.
Well, would love to open the floor. I've been just stealing Luis here with all the questions. So if anyone has questions, please interrupt me, throw stuff in the chat. But want to make sure that for the last 10 minutes here, at least everyone gets to ask their questions.
We can't close the meeting unless we get questions.
That's right. That's right.
We probably talked about this on our one-on-one, but do you run across a lot of cross-border issues or things that come up with your clientele? Seeing how many are first or second generation Hispanics in the United States. So
yeah, I haven't yet. I have some clients that like they have property like in Puerto Rico or Mexico.
Exactly. Yeah.
But they're based out of here and like all their income and assets are here. And it's just like, hey, we want to like spend some time in our house in Mexico when we get older. But that has been as probably the most I've experienced so far. Yeah, nothing like true like cross-border planning.
Okay.
So Money Guy Pro doesn't have a Puerto Rico or Mexico, so I just put Florida in there.
Yeah, I don't think they have any support for multiple currencies either, do they?
For multiple currencies?
No,
I haven't seen.
No, foreign currency. No, I don't know any software. I haven't ran across any software planning. Any planning software that does yet. So
yeah.
So if anybody does, certainly feel free to pass that along to me.
Yeah, Luis,
and that could be a great niche.
You should launch a new business. You need another one.
That's my intended niche is to focus on cross-border people, and yeah, that's going to be a hurdle. That people that have lives across multiple currencies, it's not well supported
Yeah, that could be a
by
great
our
niche.
current US centric software.
I'm always really curious hearing about other advisors, onboarding slash, somebody says they want to work with you. What is your, process from that initial reach out to they're officially a client and you start working together?
Yeah, so I try to minimize the amount of meetings that I do and actually make a determination by the end of meeting one whether we're a good fit or not. And that's another thing that I ended up really focusing on to not waste my own time, because I've experienced different things like those services that you buy leads or they send you leads and you pay. Like I've explored that, and a lot of the times, yeah, like you have to talk to like 50 people before you get like one client that fits, right? And when you look at it from a time perspective, it didn't make sense to me, right? Because I'm only one person and I don't have time to be talking to so many prospects. So what I do is I offer the initial like get to know you meeting that's complimentary. I created, it's a funny word, it's the same thing everybody does, right? But I just made it kind of like a process, right? So I call it like say Hola to Wealth, right? HOLA, and it's just have a meeting, and then on board if they decide to become clients and we think we're a good fit. Then the L is for just lay it all out, so we go a little bit deeper, have a more in-depth conversation. Then the A is for action. And I kind of just put that on the website, like, here's my process. Say Hola to Wealth is 4 steps. The first one is complimentary. We decide if we're a good fit or not. So I came up with just a series of questions that I ask clients ahead of time to kind of get an idea if we're going to be a good fit. So when they go to schedule on my website, I use Schedule One. So I think they call One's Hub now. It's kind of like Calendly basically, but I have a questionnaire that I make them fill out there. And there are some money questions like what they make and how much they have in assets, debt, if they're saving currently, and so on. And then a couple other questions like, what are you struggling with the most? How do you make your money decisions now? And so on. To kind of get an idea at first before I have a conversation with them. And then I expand on that during the meeting. I make it all about them. So it's mostly like, what are you trying to accomplish? How do you see a financial planner helping you with it? And then eventually, if I find that we're a good fit, then I would say that, and say, I would love to help you do X, Y, Z. And if you're interested, let me know. We can schedule another meeting to kind of go a little bit more in depth as to how I can help you and what that may look like, in terms of pricing and all that. A lot of people ask for the pricing in meeting one. And if they do, then I tell them then. But I make it so that at the end of meeting one, like I'm done. Like if I know I want to work with them, I'll let that be known. And then I'll send up a follow-up email with like a summary of our call and how to move forward. And if I don't think they're a good fit, I would actually tell them that too. And I'll be like, look, sounds like you probably need more like an hourly person. I don't do hourly anymore, but here's a website where you can find a planner that does hourly. Or if I happen to know somebody that specifically does what they're trying to do, then I'll say, I'm happy to make an intro. So it's a two-way street, right? Like you're interviewing them as well.
So are you doing on that first call, like more discovery type? Is it discovery type in hopes that they could potentially be a good fit? Like right now I'm doing an intro call, like, hey, this is me. And then if it's a good fit, doing discovery, but it just seems like I'm wasting so much of my time.
Yeah, I make it about
figure out
them.
my happy medium.
Yeah, I don't tell them much about me unless they have questions about me, because very likely they've already Googled me. They looked at my website and my podcast and all that, so they might have a really good idea. So I just make it, I ask them a couple of open-ended questions and just let them talk.
Okay.
And then maybe spend 5 minutes on my process and my fees if they ask.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you for sharing. That's helpful.
Definitely. All right. What else? Great questions.
Time for maybe one or two more.
If you could go back to the beginning, other than maybe starting your firm in the middle of a beginning of a pandemic, what would you change, or what do you feel like was the best decision that you made at the beginning?
Yeah, one thing that I wish I would have done was when I was working for the prior firm, I was supposed to be the successor, which ended up not working out that way. But for those 15 years, because I already thought like that was going to be my firm, I didn't make any efforts to be part of any community out there. You know, like I was not even on social media for like the large portion of my practice. You know, I wasn't networking, going to conferences, meeting other advisors. So I wish I kind of would have done that more. I think I would have had a more of a successful transition when I went on my own, as opposed to starting pretty much from scratch and having to work all these side hustles and full-time jobs while I got my business up and running. And the other thing would be to give it a really hard look at who it is that I want to work with. Very specific, you know, because at first I was just taking anybody with a pulse, you know, just trying to keep the lights on. And I find that's not the best way to go on about it. It feels that way at first because you just want to make some money and get some clients, but sometimes you waste so much time. And in the best client, you know, in terms of finances, it may not be the best fit for you, you know, just from a character standpoint. It might not be, you know, if you get a multimillionaire, but you hate the way they operate, you're not gonna, you know, when you see their name pop up on your phone or something, you just cringe. Like, that's not a good sign, right? So I wish I would have paid more focus to being like, okay, let me do this client avatar and like who truly is who I want to work with, so that I can like do all my marketing around that. Because I've been a generalist for a while, and I know it's more efficient to be specific and a specialist at something.
Makes a lot of sense. It's like you want to take the cash, but it's going to end up costing you more in the long run.
Absolutely, yeah. You're better off if you're known for that one thing, whatever that is,
Mhm.
you know. And believe me, it's gonna be better because you even end up getting referrals even from other advisors because that's your specialty, right?
Right.
I remember somebody saying that like the knee surgeon, like you don't see the knee surgeon at networking events because like they have that specialty. That's what they do, right? So they get referrals from other doctors, and it made a lot of sense to me.
Hey,
that's
just one
what's-
quick thing. Oh, sorry. I was just saying, Luis, are you going to any conferences this year? I was going to see who am I going to see in person this year? You're going to be at any?
Yeah, XYPN in Denver for sure. Really looking forward to making FPA Next Gen happen because I had a great time in St. Louis when I went, and possibly the Carson Group conference, Excel. Whenever you have anything in Vegas, you know, count me in pretty much.
Yes. Love that. Awesome. Luis, thank you so much, man, for coming out, and just love what you're doing, and can't thank you for being so gracious with your time and sharing some wisdom.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. I look forward to connecting with you all.
Sounds good. Kind of the sign off, where can people find you? Give yourself the plug in.
Yeah, so if you go to my website, buildabetterfinancialfuture.com, I'll put it in the chat as well. There you have all the links for my social media. But on Instagram and Twitter, I'm Luis_F as in Frank _Rosa. But probably easier to just go to buildabetterfinancialfuture.com and clicking on the icons there. So I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. No TikTok yet until I learn some dance moves.
Hey, there we go. Awesome. So he put his link in the chat here. So for anyone that wants to click there and connect with Luis, I encourage you to. Great follow on Twitter, especially. And cool. Well, we'll all stay in touch. And for everyone in the group here, our next meeting will be on August 15th-ish, whatever that middle of the month, Wednesday or Thursday. We'll be coming out with another speaker, and be sure to tune into FPA. We'll be sending out, spamming the information and marketing for the next event. So to everyone, good night. Thanks for coming. Thanks again, Luis.
Thank you. Great seeing you. Thank you.
Thanks, Luis.
Thanks,
Have a good
guys.
one.
Good
Yeah.
to see everyone. Have a
Thanks,
good
everyone.
summer.
Thank you.
Yep,
Good
bye.
night.